Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name's Jay Izzo, and oh, man, powerful, powerful show. Let me just say to you this. I read a lot, and because I read a book a week for the show, and then I take notes in every book that I read. And there are some books that come at the right time in your life that you didn't expect when you first booked the guest to do the show. And so I have been doing a lot of work on me, the internal side of me, not what more can I do, but stuff inside of me that from the past of growing up that has affected my success or limited my success, that has I always said that I'm a great mindset guy. I do, and it's on a continuum. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm always been a great mindset guy. It's how I coach. It's how I work. It's what I do. It's part of who I am. But there were some other things holding me back, and I happened to be doing this work. And of course, this was the week I'm reading Dr. Ryan Gottfredson, who you recognize. He's been on the show 3 or 4 times before. Becoming Better. And I told him before the show, first of all, his book is recommended for all my clients. You got to read Success Mindsets. You want to be a client of mine, you have to read Success Mindsets. And if you can't read Success Mindsets, listen to it. All right. I'll even give you the free credit because I have so many free Audible credits. I'll even give you the credit for it. I told him before the show, this is the best book he's ever written. And listen, he's a bestseller, New York, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, best-selling author. I think it's the best book he's ever written. And what happened is it falls in line with a premise that I have when I coach, and that is there are no business problems. There's only personal problems that infect your business. You've heard me say that over and over again. That the infection is you. It's not that you're not doing enough. It's not that you're doing the right things. What's inhibiting that is working on you. And I believe in taking my own advice, and I have been more recently, really digging in to me and some of the things that have happened in my life as a child and as a young adult, and even as an adult, that have affected some of my thought processes in regard to success and how I look at that, because there's some shortcomings there. And I have often said on the show and a number of different authors that we are not human doings, we're human beings. And I also have said on so many occasions, if you are what you do, who will you be when you don't do that anymore? This book really helps answer all those questions. It really does. Because we get too focused on the wrong things. You're in your business. You're looking for what's the next strategy? What's the next plan? What do I need to learn? You go to conferences and I gotta get 3 things out of a conference that I can do to make myself better. And that's what, I'm going to be speaking at a conference, and all these people just want to know, what am I going to do? What can I do next? What can I do next? And the thing that they keep missing out in is you don't really need to do anything next as much as you need to work on you next. You, the being, next. So that's what this show is going to be today. And I believe it's going to be a powerful show. I believe it's going to be an amazing show. Ryan is a friend of the show. He's been outstanding. He's gone with me on adventures when we've done a fun little thing with the mindsets that we took from Jeff Foxworthy. We did the what was it, Ryan? We did was you might be a redneck. Is that the one? Yeah, that was the one. You might have a fixed mindset if you might have a growth mindset if, and we had a lot of fun with that. This one's going to be going to be so good for you and so amazing. I'm telling you, life-changing book. It is. So let me introduce you to my friend, because he's awesome, and I just find him outstanding. I wish we lived closer together because I would be hanging out with him every day. Ryan Gottfredson, Dr. Ryan Gottfredson, is a cutting-edge leadership development author, researcher, and consultant. He helps organizations vertically develop their leaders primarily through focus on mindsets. Ryan is Wall Street and USA Today best-selling author of Success Mindsets, the key to unlocking greater success in your life, work, and leadership, which we've done here twice. We've also done his other book, The Elevated Leader, Leveling Up Your Leadership Through Vertical Development. It's up there somewhere. You'll see it up there. He is the founder and owner of his consulting company, Ryan Gottfredson, and it's Gottfredson, where he specializes in elevating leaders and executive teams in a manner that elevates the organization and its culture. He's worked with the top leadership teams at CBS, Deutsche Telekom, Experian, others. He's also partnered with dozens of organizations, Federal Reserve Bank, Nationwide Insurance, Cook Medical, etc., to develop thousands of mid-level managers and high-level leaders. He's also leadership professor at College of Business and Economics at Cal State Fullerton. His PhD is in organizational behavior. He got his BA from Brigham Young, by the way, and respected authority in research and topics related to leadership management, organizational behavior. He's published over 20 articles across a variety of journals, including Leadership Quarterly, Journal of Management, Journal of Organizational Behavior. The list goes on and on and on. His research has been cited over 4,600 times since 2019. So please welcome everybody, my friend and just great contributor to the show. Welcome back again, Ryan Gottfredson. Welcome back to A New Direction.
Hey, thanks for having me. We must have done something right the first two times, so it's great to be back. And also, I'm just so honored that you've taken so much time to dive into the book. And when I sit down and write the books, really my prayer that I have kind of in my heart as I'm writing these is, I hope that this finds the right people at the right time. And it's just so cool to hear your experience of it finding you at the at the right time. So thank you for diving in, and I'm just excited to chat more about it.
I'm excited about doing it. I want to ask, before you and I get started, I'm going to ask the audience a question that you have in your introduction, if you don't mind. Audience, right? Do any of the following statements resonate with you? I possess an inherent desire to grow and improve myself. I want to be a better person for the people I love. I want greater fulfillment and happiness. Maybe it's I want better and more fulfilling relationships. Possibly it's I want life to come more easily to me. Maybe it's I want greater professional and monetary success. Or I want to be more respected and achieve greater social recognition. I want greater health and well-being. Maybe it's I want to contribute more positively to society. How about I have spiritual moral beliefs that compel me to become better, or I have to get better, or I may face the consequences of losing out on something or someone. So before Ryan and I start, I want to ask you those, do any of those even remotely ring with you? Maybe it's something similar to that. That is how the book starts. And Ryan, you come back with the big problem is that most people do not actually have clarity on how to become better. Why?
Well, and it's a lesson that I've had to learn the hard way. But the reason why is because almost all personal development approaches and efforts are good and they're well-intended, but they actually don't help us transformationally move the needle in terms of becoming a better person. Most approaches help us to do better. So when you think about our education system, our athletic programs, and most of our organizational development efforts, it's here's what you need to know, and here's what you need to do. And that's kind of like, as you've alluded to, that's kind of like adding apps onto our iPad. That's good because it broadens our functionality, but it doesn't improve our own internal operating system. And I've come to learn, because I have failed, I have misstepped, I haven't been the person that I want to be. When I have failed, misstepped, and I haven't been the person I want to be, it hasn't been because I have lacked knowledge or skills. It's because my body's internal operating system isn't as sophisticated as it needs to be. And so what I've learned is that there's kind of two doors that we could step through to develop ourselves. And we typically step through one door, which is the doing better door. And what my book is all about is another door that very few people step through. But if we could step through it, it is transformational. And that's the being better door. And the being better door involves a different strategy, a different way of thinking, different tactics that most people aren't familiar with. But I think the objective of the book is, if we can help you to become familiar with that, then we could really start moving the needle on helping you to become the person that you want to become.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of the foundations where we're going today. But here's the thing: the book's divided up into 3 parts. Becoming Better is the book, by the way. Part 1 is to become better, you must become familiar with your being side. And so, Ryan, you've already kind of alluded to it. So let's talk about what is the definition of the doing side? What's the definition of the being side?
Yeah, doing side is our level of talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities. So think about a horizontal axis with the doing side. Now with the being side, that's on the vertical axis. Now, high level definition, it is the quality and sophistication of our body's internal operating system. Now, let me break that down. A lot of times we talk about a being side as being the quality of our character, our mindsets, our psyche, our emotional regulation abilities. Now, the reality is, and this is what science has proven, is 95% of our thinking, feeling, judging, and acting is driven by our non-conscious automatic processing. Well, guess what? Our being side is. It is in charge of our non-conscious automatic processing, right? For example, when, Jay, what would you say? When most people receive constructive criticism, they get
defensive.
They get defensive, right? That's our body's knee-jerk reaction to that situation. Now, and that's essentially baked into our programming. It is a self-protective mechanism that is designed to protect us in those moments. And while it helps us to feel comfortable by getting defensive, it actually holds us back from learning, growing, and developing. So in other words, that's one example of how our wiring may not be optimal for becoming the person that we want to become, right? So we have within us a whole bunch of programming. If this happens, then I typically respond in this way. If I receive constructive criticism, then I typically get defensive. If I get cut off on the freeway, then I will typically flip somebody off, whatever it might be, right? We are 95% of how we think, feel, judge, and act is driven by this non-conscious automatic processing. And this wiring, this programming in our internal operating system has largely been shaped by our life's experiences, our upbringing. And what I've come to learn is the wiring that we needed to have to survive our childhood is not the same wiring that we need to thrive as adults, as spouses, as parents, as employees, as leaders, as fill in the blank. And what's interesting is that 64% of adults never really change their wiring from their childhood. Because most people don't know how to, but there actually is a process, and right, we'll get into that. But hopefully that's a good introduction to what our being side is.
I think it's great to the difference. The one thing that you do here in this chapter is you have this grid of 4 boxes, and you have on the axis you've got low to high, and then on the other axis you have low to high going beneath it.
Yep.
And so, and the high, one side is the being side, the other side is the doing side, and of course, where we ultimately want to be is high being, high doing. Mm-hmm. Which is that top quarter box. But you say that really most of us stay in the low being side. That's where most of us pretty much live. Yes?
Yeah. Where most people, according to research, are in the low doing, low being quadrant. Now, if we're there, that doesn't make us bad people.
No.
But it means that we don't navigate life to the level of our potential, right? So most people aren't wildly skilled. Like think about like doctors, scientists, musicians, athletes. Most of these people are really leaders. Most of them are pretty far out on their doing side. And so when we see people develop, right, this is because of our education systems, our athletic programs, our organizational development efforts. If people develop, they typically shift out kind of to the right from low doing, low being to high doing, low being. In fact, what they find is that only 1% of adults and only 8% of executives get to a high being side level. So when most people develop, it is shifting horizontally, but not vertically.
Interesting. Collins years ago wrote the book Good to Great, right? And the premise of the book was, he looked at over 1,400 companies that were basically good and wondered why they didn't get to great, right? There were so few. And by the way, the percentages are pretty close to what you report here in leadership, because that was really the key. The key of the leader was he recognized that there was the companies that went from good to great, right? Had humility to recognize that I don't know everything, and was willing to take the criticism and was willing to see it as constructive. And then at the same time had the willingness to try things that the people around him suggested and then drive it. So the companies that ever went from good to great were those companies who the leader was in that top corner.
Yes.
Which was so few of them did it. And this is where you say what generally separates the very best from really good is not their skills, but their being side. This is going to be hard for leaders to accept. You have to admit that when you wrote this, right? When you wrote this, you were saying something, because when I work with CEOs and executives, right? And I tell them, okay, this isn't about, your marketing plan, your strategic or anything. It's about you. They look at me like, you've got this wrong and I hired the wrong coach. Now, the ones who stick with me and get it, all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, we're not having the same conversations we had when we first started. I'm thinking differently. I'm starting to do that, right? That's what you do too. How do you, with your clients, how do you get them to buy into it's not your skills, it's you?
Well, it's to your point, it's not easy, largely because how are most leaders incentivized? They're incentivized to do more and to do better. They are not incentivized to be more and to be better, right? So we're working against an incentive structure. And so one of the things that I found really helpful is I need to expose them. And I think Jim Collins did this in a great way with his work. But I need to expose them to leaders who operate at a high being side level, even at that highest level. And so, like you, when I work with leaders, I generally have kind of a list of books for them to read, to try to expose them to some of these leaders and to help them to see, look, these are leaders that are uncommon, but operate at a level that we rarely see. And when we find them, their impact is transformational. So let me give you some examples of some of these leaders and some of these books. So one of my primary go-tos is Satya Nadella at Microsoft. He wrote the book Hit Refresh. Alan Mulally at Ford. There's a great book called American Icon about him. I'm rereading this book right here. It's called Turn the Ship Around by David Marquet. It is a powerhouse. There's Ed Catmull, who's the founder of Pixar Animation. He wrote the book Creativity Inc. I've also looked at books by Indra Nooyi, who's the CEO of PepsiCo, Mary Barra, the CEO at GM. And when you look at these leaders and you study them, you very quickly learn they beat to a different drum and they have a different and more profound impact. And so that's been what I've found to be the most effective way of helping leaders to see, like, because most leaders they elevate, but when they elevate kind of for one step, they kind of think, oh, I'm done. I've arrived. But guess what? There's another level that's there. And that's hopefully what this book, Becoming Better, also helps expose leaders to.
His name's Ryan Gottfredson, Dr. Ryan Gottfredson, excuse me. Becoming Better is the book, The Groundbreaking Science of Personal Transformation. I would just say, I would argue success in every area of your life is my argument as a tertiary title. You're listening to him here on A New direction. One click. That's all it takes for ransomware phishing to shut your business down. Stop the threat at the source with Data 443 Siren, Cyren, powered by the world's most robust threat intelligence network. Siren detects and blocks attacks in real time, protecting your data, your employees, and your reputation. Stop hoping you're safe. Start knowing you're safe. Visit data443.com right now. See the solution. Check out Siren. And Linda Craft, Team Realtors. Here's the deal. We all know that buying and selling a home isn't just a transaction. It's a major life transition. Whether you're buying your first place, making room for a new baby, downsizing for retirement, can be incredibly stressful. That's why you need Linda Craft, Team Realtors. For over 40 years, Linda has been helping people in the communities all over actually navigate these big challenges. Her team doesn't just sell houses. They take the stress out of the process so you can focus on your future. Don't go it alone. Let 40 years of experience work for you. Visit lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Ryan Gottfredson, the book, Becoming Better, the groundbreaking science of personal transformation. Outstanding book. I read it and then I reread it again when I was taking the notes. Sometimes I take the notes while I'm reading the book, and I got so absorbed into the book, I decided I was going to read it and then I was going to go back through it again and then take the notes so that I could really get some of these concepts really built into me as I'm doing my work on trying to be better. My wife doesn't need me to do better. My wife needs me to be better, right? My friends don't need me to do better. They need me to be better. My clients don't need me to do better. They need me to be better. That's the big thing I recognized. You ask a question here, which side holds people back from becoming their best selves? And it feels like we kind of answered it, but one of the things you talk about is that you went to Google and you decided to look at the most common struggles in Google. And you found the following. The most common struggles that people struggle with is stress, anxiety, depression, self-doubt, addiction, relationships, finances, and life changes. And then you ask a question. Do you think that most people struggle with these things because of their deficiency on their doing side or deficiencies on their being side? Let's talk about this, because I think, when people think that they say that they're stressed or they're depressed or, I'm burned out. That's another one, burned out, or I've got compassion fatigue. That's okay. What do I got to do? Let's talk about these things in terms of being versus doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Let's see. I'm going to give you an option, and if you want to, we could go to both. But let's dive into at least one of those. So I'm going to give you the option. Do you want to dive into relationships or finance?
Let's do finances. I think that would be fun.
Okay. So finances. Let me give you just a personal story. So I'm somebody who graduated with a bachelor's degree in finance. I feel like I have learned how money works, right? I have downloaded the finance app onto my iPad. So that's, I'm decently far out there along the doing side when it comes to finance. But as and of course I graduated with my bachelor's degree in my early 20s. And then as I'm going through my adult life, I'm realizing that things aren't going well for me financially. And it's okay, well, why is that? Well, is it because I don't know enough about money or I'm not skilled with money? And the reality is no, I was. And what I came to learn is that my limitations as it relates to money didn't have to do with my knowledge and skills. It had to do with how I was wired to think about money. So let me give you a little bit of a backstory. My dad was grew up at the tail end of the Great Depression. And in the so that kind of paints a little bit of the picture. In the early 1980s, he was an entrepreneur. He had an engineering consulting business. And in the economic downturn of the early 80s, he was essentially forced to sell his business. And then he took a stable civic job as a civil engineer for the city that I grew up in. All this to say is my dad had issues with money himself. And when I came around, I was born in the early 80s. For me growing up, I saw my parents as being maybe the most frugal people I ever met. I mean, my mom even she would sew my coats, and they were the ugliest winter coats, and she did it, right? That was just a way to save some money. And to kind of give you a taste of that. So what I now know that I didn't know then is that my dad had what I now will call a deficit mindset. And when you have a deficit mindset, you see kind of your money and wealth as a fixed pie, and your job is to save as much of that pie as possible, right? So we're going to skimp on our costs as a way to absorb more money. And so part of this is my dad taught me at a very early age, you never want to be an entrepreneur because you put your family at risk, and you never want to go into debt because that eats away at your fixed pie with these interest payments. So, right, I know finance, but this is still my mentality as an adult. I have this deficit mindset. And I came to learn, and there was a great book that really helped me with this. It's a book that's called You're a Badass at Making Money. It's written by Jen Sincero. She's a snarky character, and I love her writing. And she helped me to see my mindset towards money was not ideal. That rather than having a deficit mindset, I need to have what's called an abundance mindset. And an abundance mindset is not about how do you take as much of a fixed pie as possible. The abundance mindset is it doesn't matter the size of your piece of your pie. What matters is the size of the pie. And so it's better to have a small piece of a large pie than a big piece of a small pie. And with a change in that mentality, which is a change to how I'm wired to see money, what I'm doing here, and this is a key aspect of being side development, is I'm changing my relationship with money. We know we are vertically developing when we are changing our relationship with something. And so I changed my relationship with money. And once I was able to do that, then what do? Is I decide I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I decide I'm going to go in debt to help my business to be successful. And in doing that and in putting myself in that position, yes, it felt scary, but I put myself in a position to start growing the size of the pie as opposed to just kind of playing with my fixed salary as a salaried employee. And so hopefully that's a decent example of how, look, I had the knowledge and skills, but I didn't have the mindsets that allowed me to be successful. So that's just an example of finance. I'm happy for you to build off of that.
No, first of all, it's the most common one, which is why I chose it. I think it's more common than what anybody out there wants to and freely admit. All right. I mean, I don't think any of us want to believe that we have a coding in our brain. We have, a coding, or you say wiring. We have this bad code in our brain that doesn't understand that there's always money available in any economy, anywhere, and that's an abundant mindset. And so what people do is they get stuck. I've been stuck there, and largely because of my own horrible relationship with money and because of my parents, but also recognizing that, what? Wait a minute. When the stock market goes down, where does the money go? There's still money out there somewhere, right? It just didn't disappear. Somebody got the money, right? When stock market goes up, where'd the money go? Right? So it's not like there's this limited supply of it. And when you start to recognize that, well, it's actually kind of unlimited, right? And you start having this idea of going, I can tap into that. I do have a set of gifts, talents, abilities. And my problem is I'm thinking wrong. My coding is wrong, and it's coming from my parents too. And I had to fight that because prior to my parents, my grandparents were incredibly successful. Incredibly successful. They were entrepreneurs. My dad stopped that. He stopped that cycle and was much like your dad. Because my dad started out as an entrepreneur with his own business. And then it ended. Right. And so I think the financial part is just something that a lot of people can relate to.
Well, and it's not just, I'll just build on that. It's
Yeah,
not just our relationship with money. There's other factors that are connected to that. What's our relationship with risk? What's our relationship with
absolutely.
failure? What's our relationship even with ourselves? Right?
Yeah,
Because a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, and let's say they fail, which guess what? That's normal for being an entrepreneur. And you see some entrepreneurs that now causes them to wither, right? Because they internalize that as a shame inducing thing. But there's other entrepreneurs that, oh my goodness, that may have been the best thing that ever happened to me because I learned and grew so much from that
right.
now I'm in a better position to be successful moving forward. And so at the core, and I just kind of hopefully put an exclamation point on this idea is when you do being side work, at its core, it's about healing our relationship with ourselves. It's
Yes.
healing our minds and our bodies and our hearts.
Yep.
And to me, that's maybe the most beautiful message connected to this book and kind of doing this work is because foundationally it is about healing. And sometimes that's generational, as you kind of allude to.
Yeah. It is very much so. This brings me to altitude of the two sides, right? This idea of wiring for self-protection versus value creation,
Yep.
right? Because that's a thought, that's a different thinking process too, because I think, our automatic processes want to just go right to, I got to self-protect, right? This is where, I got to play it safe, right? And it's me focused and that whole thing. Talk about the altitude piece because I think that is a significant part of this book as well.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Jay, you grew up playing sports. I know you played football, but did you play any basketball growing up?
I was a great water boy. I did. I mean, I did. I wasn't. I was a decent rebounder, not a great.
Okay.
Rebounder. I was a decent rebounder. I just didn't have a shot.
So I'm going to use a basketball example if that's okay. And you just tell me if you think I'm wrong. So one of the things I've learned playing basketball is to if you want to be a really good basketball player, you got to be able to shoot layups with both your dominant hand and your non-dominant hand. Would you agree?
Of course.
Okay.
I practice that regularly. Yeah.
So I coach my son's basketball team, and my son is 11 years old. Okay. And so what that means is, as I coach his team, is they are not very good because they're 11, right? And my job as a coach is to help them to get better. And all of the players on my team are right-handed. And they're at the age where they need to learn how to start shooting layups with their non-dominant hand. And so what I do at the beginning of every practice and every game, we do layup lines. We start on the right side. I have them dribble up with their right hand. They go off their left foot and they shoot a layup with their right hand, right? And they're all pretty accomplished at doing that. And then we move to the left side. And now I invite them to dribble up with their left hand, jump off of their right leg, and then shoot with their left hand. And so I invite my players to do this all the time. And I get 3 different responses from my players, okay? The first response is that they don't even try. Well, why don't they try? Well, because they're going to feel awkward, they're going to look awkward, and they're probably going to miss their shot, right? So that's the first response. The second response that I get is I get some players who are willing to try and practice, but not in a game. Well, why aren't they willing to try in a game? Well, now the pressure's on to perform. They've got their parents recording them on the sidelines. They don't want to let their teammates down. They want to win the game, right? So that's the second response. The third response that I get is that I get a couple of players who are willing to try in practice and in a game to shoot with their non-dominant hand. And why are they willing to do this? Well, at some capacity, they are willing to say to themselves, look, if we don't win today, that's okay. But what's really important is that I get better, that I become somebody who could create greater value for myself and for my team in the future. And if I could try to do this in practice and in the game, I will become a greater value creator. And so effectively, hopefully what is coming across is I've set up how we got players that are wired in 3 different ways. And if I were to ask all of these players Did you respond to my instruction in the best way possible? I think they all would have said yes. And they could all justify it, right? I didn't want to miss my shot. I didn't want to let my team down, right? For those first two. And then the last one is, I'm willing to do this because I want to learn, grow, and develop. And what this paints here, as you alluded to, is a continuum from their, because I think that if you were to ask them, is this their knee-jerk reaction or intentional thought-out responses? And I would say their knee-jerk reaction. It's how they're wired to operate. And so what I've just tried to paint is a continuum where some of the players are more wired for self-protection. In other words, they're wired to help them feel most comfortable in that moment. Others are wired for value creation, which generally means that they have the capacity to sit with short-term discomfort in pursuit of long-term value creation, right? So that's an example. We could also go back to our example of receiving constructive criticism. Do we immediately get reactive, right, and defensive, and as a way to preserve our emotions in the short term? Or do we have the capacity to sit with that short-term discomfort in pursuit of learning, growth, and development? And so hopefully these examples just help you better understand that there is this continuum, and it allows us to start to ask the question, where am I along that continuum? Am I more wired for self-protection, or am I more wired for value creation? And when I work with leaders, of course, there's situations in which they are willing to be more value creating, but there are also situations in which they are more prone for self-protection. And until they deal with that, they're going to continue to get in their way of the goals and kind of dreams that they have.
I love it. I love that example. I think it's just a perfect example with the kids. We do it in adults. We have the same three reactions, right? We either don't try, or we'll try it behind closed doors, or we do have the few people who will go, I'll give it a go both ways, right? We'll do that in leadership too. Chapter 4, there's something here that I want us to get to, because I think it's too important. The primary causes of being side differences. And you say that there's 3 big factors that impact our being side. Altitude. One is traumatic life experiences. The other is current culture. And then the final one is the neurological functionality. And you do spend an awful lot of time on trauma. And I think we should, because I think it's the biggest one of the 3. I'm not trying to dismiss the other 2. Certainly there are some neurological functionality. We're both from the psychology field where we did our graduate work.
And when you say that, I commonly refer to ADHD, but there could be other factors just to kind of bring that to life, right?
Absolutely right. There's several things that could be. Yes, typically the ADHD, but you're mostly familiar with that. So that's why I know you brought that up. These 3 factors, the traumatic life experience, let's spend a little time there, that it's causing some being side differences. Am I wrong? Because this is what at least I get with my clients, is they don't want to necessarily admit that they had any trauma.
I don't know if it's they don't want to admit it, or they don't even recognize that it occurred. I mean, that was kind of part of my story. But no, you're spot on. And here's what I've learned that 70% of adults have experienced significant trauma in their life. Right? So that's most people have experienced significant trauma. Now, when I say trauma, this doesn't just mean that I experience kind of a bad event of some sort. How we define trauma is not what occurs to us. It's our body's reaction to what occurs to us. So in other words, what could be traumatic for one person may not necessarily be traumatic for another. But when we experience trauma, again, that can be, or a traumatic experience, that can be like a single episode, or it could be long drawn out kind of situational factors such as neglect, as an example. And so whenever somebody experiences trauma, our body's nervous system's natural reaction to experience trauma is to move towards being wired for self-protection. It is our body's natural defense mechanism to experiencing pain, is to move towards self-protection. And so the more somebody experiences trauma, over time, the more their body becomes wired for self-protection as opposed to value creation. And so what I do find is, to your point, is trauma is, to what I've learned, is the leading cause of people operating at a lower being side level. And that goes back to the idea that I shared earlier, is in order for us to elevate along our being side, it really is about healing our body's mind, body, and heart, our body's nervous system, from the consequences of prior hurt or trauma.
So good. We're not going to let that go. I can promise you that. His name is Dr. Ryan Gottfredson. The book is entitled Becoming Better, The Groundbreaking Science of Personal Transformation. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, in the digital world, your inbox is the front line. Is yours defended? Data 443 Siren, CYREN, provides next generation anti-phishing and threat detection that works instantly in the cloud. It's the invisible shield that keeps your business running smoothly while blocking the chaos outside. You don't even see it running, by the way. Protect what you built. Head on over to data443.com and get protected today. Linda Craft Team Realtors, if you're planning a move, you're going to have to check out lindacraft.com, LINDACREFT.com. Honestly, it has so much more than just home listings that everybody has. Linda understands the moving impacts the whole family, including your kids and pets. That's why she features on her website a child psychologist who talks about how to help your kids adjust to the move. Even tips from a veterinarian on how to move with your pets. It is a complete emotional resource center for your family. See the difference for yourself. Log on today, lindacraft.com, LINDACRAFT.com. And let me tell you something, just to jump off of Ryan's thing here. I'm a psychological professional, but I'm also came from the farm. And the fact of the matter is you can plant all the seeds that you want, but if the soil's bad, guess what? There's not going to be a great harvest. So listen, if you're out there and you are looking for a way to have a bigger harvest in what you're doing in your life or your career or your business, why don't you check me out at coachingmavericks.com. That's very, very simple. Or you can write me very simply at j@thecoachj.com. I'd love to help. Reach out to me. We're back here on A New Direction with my friend Ryan Gottfredson. The book is entitled Becoming Better, The Groundbreaking Science of Personal Transformation. I could spend all day talking about the trauma, and you and I have talked about trauma before. I think the one thing about the trauma piece is this. For me, I felt a sense of guilt with saying that my parents did this to me. Mm. Right? I did not want, because I didn't want to freely admit, right, that, my parents gave me some bad coding in my operating system. And so every time I would try to do something, I was very limited in the amount of success that I would have. And there were so many other things that would come up. There was incidents that I've been dealing with that I shared with my wife just recently as last night, where I literally got up in the middle of the morning because all these things kept flooding back to me. And I think the thing that I had to come to the conclusion, I hope this helps people too, and I hope you'll respond to it, is that I had to finally come to a different mindset with my parents, my mom and dad. It wasn't that they were trying to hurt me. It was that they were doing the best that they had with the coding that they had. Mm-hmm. And they thought that what their coding was doing was the right thing. And they had no way of thinking any different because they never thought any different. Mm-hmm. And so that bad coding got pushed onto me. I'm not angry with them about that because I recognize it was the best they could do. Am I still affected? Oh gosh, yes. Mm-hmm. Was it traumatic? and were they? And as I dig through this, I'm going, oh my gosh, there's no reason I react this way. It's no reason that I say these things. I understand it, right? I think there's a piece to that too, in those experiences, that we have to acknowledge that it's not that we're throwing them under a bus or that we need to be mad at the coding that we've been given, but maybe we need to think differently, that it was the best coding they had.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. I mean, I'll use myself as an example, as I've kind of been diving into this. One of the things I've come to learn for myself is, while my parents were always there for me physically, they were rarely, if ever, there for me emotionally. So that means I experienced some emotional neglect growing up. And to your point, and as I've done research, and both my parents have passed away, but as I've talked to others, is both of my parents, they didn't receive emotional support from their parents. So I don't even think my parents knew how to give that. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, is, if you ask my wife and kids, how good am I at giving emotional support? Well, I'm, not the best, because it was never modeled for me, but I'm, part of my journey is I'm trying to learn how to do that better.
Right.
Because what I've learned, and this is part of my wiring, everybody's a little bit different, but because I received this emotional neglect, I developed what's called an avoidant attachment style. And what that means is I couldn't trust others to meet my emotional needs. I was on my own. And because I can't trust others, I almost want to keep others at a different distance, because if I let them in, I just feel like I'm going to get let down. So in all of my relationships throughout my upbringing, even into my adult life, and I would say even with my wife, is I've kind of kept them at a figurative emotional arm's length distance. And it's just a part of my wiring. I didn't know that I was doing it. But I had a really hard time letting people in. Now, I'm still not as good as I could be, but I'm much better now that I know this. Right. And in a way, I'm trying to use this as an example just to show how we are wired. I was wired to be really independent, to keep people at an emotional arm's length. And until I became an adult and really started diving into this, I had no clue that how I was operating wasn't ideal or optimal, because it felt so right to me, because it felt so self-protective. But it wasn't value creating for me or for the people around me. So I've had to change my relationship with closeness, right? When people get close, I typically get a little uncomfortable, but I've had to learn how to change that wiring such that rather than it feeling uncomfortable, it's something that should feel nurturing in a way. And so anyways, I'll just use myself as an example, as a way to try to just bring everything we've been talking about to light and what it means, right? And hopefully people are seeing some themes, right? And I'll come back to it. We mentioned it before. We know when we are elevating along our being side, when we are changing our relationship with things, with others, with ourselves. And hopefully that just came through for my personal example.
I'm connected with Tasha Urich on LinkedIn.
Yeah, she's great.
And she's outstanding, by the way. And I have her latest book up here on the shelf. And, she did all this research on self-awareness. And you quoted in here, when she did it, she found that 95% of the people want to believe that they're pretty darn self-aware. But the truth is only about 10 to 15% are actually aware, which means that about 80% of us are lying to ourselves about whether we're lying to ourselves, which I find funny, right?
Yeah, she's got a great line there. Yep.
But I think the thing about that is that part of the healing is, which is in beginning of part 2 of this book, To Become Better, You Must Awaken the Quality and Sophistication of Your Being Side, is that we have to, if you really want to heal, and if you really want to get better, you've got to deepen your self-awareness.
Yeah. Well, I think the statistics, I think 95% of us think that we're self-aware because we know our doing side. But to truly be self-aware, you've got to know both your doing side and your being side.
Right.
And I think that's where only 10 to 15% actually know the quality of their being side. And so, yeah, hopefully if this is, causing some interest, or if you want to dive into this more, grab the book to help you to awaken more to your quality of your being side, because it's only then that we'll have a sense of how to elevate along our being side.
I think we have to be fair to the listener, because I can hear them in my head saying, okay, you got me. Can you give me some starter level activities that I can work on this? Can you give me a little, Ryan, please, can you give me a little something that I could at least start? And you do. And of course, in chapter 17 called Starter Level Activities to Elevate Your Being Side, you give us the story of Navy SEAL David Goggins. Great book, by the way, entitled You Can't Hurt Me, which I would recommend. You still there?
Yeah, lost you for a minute. My apologies.
Oh, what are some of the starter level activities that can get people going?
Well, I'm going to add to something I said earlier. So I've said earlier that you're elevating along your being side when you're changing your relationship with something. And that's completely accurate. Another statement that I'm going to make is, in order for us to vertically develop, we have to alter how our nervous system functions. And so whenever we talk about tactics for elevating along our being side, they have to be tactics that alter and improve the sophistication of our nervous system. And so I think about it in 3 different depths: starter level activities, deeper level activities, and deepest level. So these starter level activities are things like learning to do breath work, meditation, yoga, journaling, even cold plunging. The reason why these are starter level is anybody can do them. And if we could develop a habit of these things, research has found it helps us refine our body's nervous system and helps us to be more in control of our nervous system, as opposed to our nervous system driving us. So that's starter level. Do you want to add anything before I just quickly identify the other two?
Yeah, I would just say this, for me, gratitude journaling was a really huge thing for me.
Yeah.
The gratitude journaling was so good. Reading, doing the show now for 8 years and reading those books was a great starter activity for me.
Yeah.
Reading your books, but reading all these books from cover to cover, not just breezing through them, but really digging in and taking the notes, of 380 books or whatever I've read, we've done on this show. Right. And really absorbing it was the huge thing for me. But the change I have to make, if you really want to know the truth, is my self-talk has to change.
Yeah.
So go ahead. And
working on your self-talk is one of those. But then to your point is, we generally need to take it to a deeper level. So at the deeper level, what we want to do here is we want to become aware of specific aspects about our programming that get in our way. So for example, if we tend to get defensive when we receive constructive criticism, let's work on that particular program. If I keep my spouse at an arm's length distance because it makes me feel comfortable, let me work on that particular program. In the work that I do with leaders and organizations, I typically focus on mindsets as a way to get really clear on particular types of programming. So that's the deeper level. The deepest level is generally not the place to start, but a lot of people need to get here eventually. And at the deepest level is when we receive some sort of professional support to help us upgrade our internal operating system. So generally, this is some form of therapy. It could be psychological therapy, trauma therapy, neurofeedback therapy, and even there's research out there on psychedelic assisted therapy, and how quickly that helps us to rewire. But all of those aren't the place to start, but maybe a place we need to get to if we really want to do the upgrading that we need to be the person we want to be.
I hate to say this to you, but we've done an hour. It really goes fast. When we're together and we're doing this and we're talking back and forth, it's just, we both have a little bit of this avoidant thing because I grew up, pretty much having to be on my own because I grew up in a very small town. There was not a lot of people. It was 119 people. There weren't little boys I could hang out with. So I grew up being alone a lot. Right. And so I understand the discomfort that comes because I had a terrible reputation as a young man prior to marriage of being in and out of relationships very, very quickly. Right. Because I was afraid of that. I was afraid of the closeness of that. And so it's so good because it just, I hear myself in you so much, and I'm, quite a bit older. So, so good. Tell people how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, I appreciate you diving into this conversation, being vulnerable, allowing me to share parts of my story. And if people want to connect further, my website, ryangottfredson.com. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so I would love to connect with anybody there. In fact, I'll throw this out there. If anybody's listening, I've got a couple of free assessments to help you evaluate your being side altitude on my website. If you go there and if you take any of my assessments that are there, forward me your results and say, hey, I heard you on Jay's show. I will gladly sit down with you for a half hour and talk through your results. So if anybody's interested in that, I'd be happy to do that.
How about that, folks? How about that? Wow. You got to do that. By the way, I've done these assessments, but probably my avoidant attachment style keeps me from talking to Ryan for 30 minutes because I talked to him for an hour. Ryan, thank you so much. I'll make sure I put that. I'll put the assessments on the blog post associated with this as well. Folks, this show, what I say to you every week, in control of three things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Life doesn't always give us what we want. We always find ourselves in circumstances we didn't choose, but you can choose your attitude. It's not always easy, but you can do it. Make it a positive one and make that choice. Your effort's tied to your excellence. We don't always have the same amount of energy in the tank, but what you do have, how excellent can you be with that? And then finally, resilience. We all get punched in the gut, punched in the teeth, and we get knocked down, but it's up to you to get back up. Why? Because you're worth it, and we want you on the team. I'll be back next week with another great guest. It's going to be another great show. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. I thank you for that. I am always grateful that you made that choice. Do me a favor. Would you give us a thumbs up on YouTube? And wherever you're listening to the show, give us a 5-star review. More importantly, tell your friends. We appreciate that. As I say to you all over the world, thank you. And you know what it is, right? Ciao, everybody.